My brothers and sisters, we all know the story of David and Goliath, how God used a brave young man full of faith to face a huge giant hulk of a human for God and for his people Israel. With sling in hand, he chose 5 smooth stones from a brook and yelled charge as he ran into a valley of what seemed like certain death. But God guided his actions and the stone and right between the eyes of the giant Goliath, who fell flat. David, as we know, is not the only person to come up against a giant. All believers, all you and I, will find ourselves face to face with big challenges, and quite often. But on a few rare occasions, you find yourself staring into the eyes of a Goliath. Then either fear or faith takes over. Sadly, most often it is fear and an expectation that we are about to be squashed. Notice that the Philistines had invaded the Israelite territory. In verse 1 it says, the territory which belongeth to Judah. Goliath stood and defied the army of God, and they are huddled together, frightened, and did not attempt to do anything to eliminate him. But then, a teenage Hebrew shepherd, a boy named David, showed up in the camp with some bread and cheese for his soldier big brothers, and heard the giant pour out his scorn against the Lord. David was indignant. So he took his shepherd's sling, grabbed a few stones, and knocked Goliath on the block. Now the question is, why did the other Israelite soldiers shrink back from taking on Goliath? These men believed in God, and they knew about Israel's history. They knew the stories how God had overcome one giant adversary after another. Many of them had personally seen God do amazing things. But no, the men lacked faith and courage to face Goliath, because at this moment the men lacked faith. At this moment, for whatever reason, despite all the stories and past experiences, Goliath looked bigger than their God. So what made David different? The difference was David's courage wellspring. He was not self-confident, he was God-confident. The famous Protestant pastor, Rick Warren, says often that everyone needs a dream for their lives. God actually has a dream for our lives. We need to help people follow God's dream for their lives and for our own lives. He says for every person, Rick Warren says, for every person that follows their dream, there are 9 people that never got started. What causes us not to get started? The giants in the pathway. These are giant problems and dream busters that say you will not pass by. You are stuck here. If we believe it, we get stuck in mediocrity. Pope John Paul II, one of my heroes, used to believe, don't settle for second best. No matter what others ask of you, ask the best of yourself. It was one facet of John Paul II's remarkably magnetic appeal for young people. From his years as a university chaplain, he knew that young souls yearned for heroism, including religious and moral heroism. He also knew that striving often fails, that we are all less than we strive to be. But that didn't seem to John Paul a reason to lower the bars of our expectations. The answer to failure was not resignation, settling for second or third best. The answer was to recognize that Christ was down there in the dust with us, as he had fallen along the way of the cross. So get up, seek forgiveness and reconciliation, and try again. With the help of grace and answering the call of Jesus, follow me. Strive to be someone of character, compassion, and conviction. Don't settle for mediocrity, he would say. You are called to be great in the eyes of God. Some great challenge, some Goliath is often looming larger than God in our sight and taunting us into humiliation. All we see is how weak and how pathetic we sometimes are, and how inadequate we sometimes feel as we face these challenges. Fighting him seems impossible, and the thought immobilizes us. All of us experiences this fear. So did David. David is such a helpful example for us, not only because he fueled his courage and confidence to face Goliath from God's promises, but also because he so frequently felt fearful in his own life, but needed to encourage his soul again by remembering God's promises. Do not be satisfied with mediocrity. The world promises you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. As John Paul II said, you were made for greatness.